Hey everybody, this is Eric Trujillo from Evita Strings here in Denver, Colorado. We're part of the Colstein Music Collective, and we're starting a new video blog, and we've been really excited about this project and wanting to do it for quite some time. And I feel really blessed and privileged to talk to our first guest here. He's been a hero of mine in the music community here in Denver, Colorado for as long as I've known him. Which is at least 30 years now. For those of you that don't know this gentleman, his name is Ken Walker. He's a soft-spoken guy, but I can tell you that he's a legend in the bass community and the jazz community, both locally and nationally and internationally known. And I'm so happy to have him here and to call him a friend and have him here in the shop. So we're going to ask some questions. We're going to chat it up a little bit with Ken here and get to know him a little bit more. We always feel it's important to know our history, the people that have come before us and where we're headed, and have these important discussions. So I'm going to start with some questions that I have unprofessionally written on an envelope today. So this is Ken Walker.
Hello.
So Ken, where did you hear the bass, your first time you ever heard an upright bass?
Well, I mean, I started like in the 4th and 5th grades. Back in Arkansas, some reason they brought in someone to teach like string instruments.
Yeah.
And so I chose the cello. That was my first.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I really liked playing cello. And I was, I didn't know anything about the bass, man. I was just playing cello, and I was like really happy playing cello. And then they just took it out of the school system.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't do anything. So, and then when I got to high school, I started playing tuba.
Mm-hmm.
And I played tuba all the way through high school. And I got a college scholarship, paid for my college. And in college, I started playing bass again. Started playing bass.
Uh-huh.
And because, what was it? Oh, they did for the jazz band.
Uh-huh.
I say, and I never played jazz. I'd heard it, and I was just, I would say I was jazz curious.
Yeah, yeah.
And the more I got into it, I really got into playing the bass and just like.
It just grew on you. Yeah. You just knew that was the thing.
Yeah.
You had this.
I turned down teaching gigs,
Oh.
because I told my parents, no, I want to play jazz and I want to play the bass. And
Really?
they were like, my father wasn't. What you turn out?
Well, what are you going to teach? Were you going to teach music or?
Yeah, that's what my degree was.
That was your degree.
Yeah. And I just, and I was like, after I started playing jazz, I was like, I think I want to do this.
That's when you knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that I can write a couple of these questions off. What were some of your early influences in the development of your playing in the bass?
I'll kind of give them to you in the order that Leroy Vinegar was like the first bass player I listened to, and I'll say that because he was he didn't there were a lot of great bass players, it was like, but he when I was starting, that was a good level to start at,
Yeah.
because he just basically, I mean, he took solos, but that wasn't his main thing. His main claim to fame was that, everything I read about him was that everybody loved his feel and, his time and everything.
Yeah.
So that was my kind of first mentor that I kind of went, used him as an example of how I wanted to play.
Foundation.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and then over the years, as I got to hear other, Ray Brown and Paul Chambers, and I started incorporating some of their things.
That was your, yeah. Well, now, we talk about the players that inspire us on our instruments. And who were some of your influences with composers, writing? was it classical, jazz, or combination of all of it?
Well, I didn't really write anything until I decided to, make a CD, and I wrote some tunes, but there were some tunes that we had been playing in the sextet, so that's I wrote, those were the tunes I wrote, and I wrote, I had some standards,
Right.
too, but.
And in those young, early years, though, were there arrangements and composers that turned you on? A lot of people have a list like Ellington or.
Well, I listened to a lot of those guys, but
Yeah.
and I mean there probably may be some of that in but my tunes, it was I wrote these tunes initially because we were doing a CD and I had to write some tunes since I was the leader.
Wow.
And,
So that was early on. You were already writing.
well, later on, I didn't, for a long time, I didn't take solos or anything, man, because I was just focusing on just playing the bass.
Just laying it down, yeah.
And, people would ask, no.
Yeah.
And, then I started just looking up things online and in books and just reading about how to solo and how to think about it. But the big thing that got me was I was reading Dizzy Gillespie's biography, and somebody had asked him, "What do you think about when you're soloing?" He says, "I think of a rhythm, and then I put notes to it."
Yeah.
And because I hardly ever took any solos before, because they just suck. I just gotta suck at this.
Right. Yeah. Even the great Ken Walker at some point worried about that.
And so, but when I read that by Dizzy Gillespie, that changed the way I started thinking about how to solo, because I knew what notes to play, but it's jazz is like a rhythmic thing,
Right.
and the rhythms are almost more important than the notes.
Yeah.
The rhythmic ideas. So after that kind of got me in the right path, and after that, I just kept doing it and just listening to other bass players. Went to Paul
Solos and that application first. That's great advice. I wish I'd have had that.
Well, I mean, it's like because I just I knew the chords and everything, and so for a long time I never took solos.
Yeah.
Until when I read that, and it was like, oh, okay. And then from then on, I just started. I would just take, especially when like iReal book came along, and like all those things like that you could play. You could practice. Along with the rhythm section.
Right.
Even I just took the bass out.
Yeah.
And started doing that, and just to figure out things and stuff like that. I mean, also, just to, even when I was using it as a practice,
Yeah.
just to, and like I said, I didn't take a lot solos for a long time, and eventually I got comfortable. And,
It just blows my mind. I've spent, I've played with you a bit over the years, not in recent years, but I was always impressed by your solo prowess, man. And it's refreshing to hear even our inspirations and the people we look up to, and think of those times where, hey, we're just humans just like us, working on their thing.
It's like everybody, you got to go through that period of figuring things out and understanding what's going on, really, because even though jazz, I mean, it's kind of a complicated music, because you're having to improvise, when you're doing tunes and things, but that's different from the improvisation part that comes later, because that's what jazz is all about. I know what they use the tunes as a material, but eventually you just use the tunes as the chord, especially the harmony, and for your own.
It's a stepping off point, man. Right? Yeah. Was there any gig have you had any gigs or moments where you're performing or on a stage and you look up and you see an artist you're playing with and thought, you know, man, this is really happening. This is,
yeah. When I played with Benny Golson, when I played,
there's those quintessential moments where you're just like,
because that was when I was in Little Rock, and I was the one who brought him in, and that was how I met him, and brought me he wanted me to come to New York, and so I went to New York to play with him, and that's a whole nother story.
That felt like the.
Well, it wasn't that. I was fine with playing with Benny Golson.
That was confirmation, though. That didn't.
Well, it wasn't. It was confirmation, but it was also when I got there, all these bass players showed up.
Right. Yeah.
All these bass players, because he said, I told Ron about you, and Ron Carter comes out. I was like, geez.
The jury's right in front of you watching you play, man. Oh, man.
I was like, don't think about Ron Carter over there. Don't think about Rufus Reed. Don't think about all these people that I had been listening to, talking and learning from on records and CDs. But they were all very supportive, and I took some lessons with Ron Carter, and he was very positive, saying you sound good, and just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. It's amazing. I felt that way. As a kid who was, learning jazz in my youth. When I was in high school, I remember standing outside the Peck on those jazz nights, and couldn't go in, but you were always in the house band, playing at the Peck or the Jazz Works or the Beowulf or whatever it was at that time, and so I remember some of the early first gigs when I had enough nerve to call you to play with me, and you were so generous, man, and it was such a gift that you were always you've been willing to work with the new artists and the new kids, and that was one of my great moments, was like looking up and turning around, and I realized Ken Walker's on bass, and that was a great feeling. So you've always been great about your sharing your teaching, and it's just such a positive role model with your players and everything. So if nobody's told you that, man, I'll be the first to tell you that was such appreciated, because.
Well, it's like all these guys that I got to meet, they were always very open when I would ask them questions and things. So
sometimes it felt hard, and you were one of the first musicians in my young developmental years that was really, really kind to me that way, and Charles and McNeil and Bradley and some of those cats, but it's so.
They were, and the whole thing about this, when you approach somebody like that on that level, I approached them saying, I'm just started, learning the bass, and can you give me some, I'm taking a lesson with them, and just give me some. Information that I need to know. And they were always very open, and to the point that, like I said, whenever somebody was coming out here to Denver, or initially in Little Rock, they would say, "Oh, any bass player?" And so they started recommending me to. So that's how I started to get to play with all these different people, even in Little Rock. And like I say, some of the times I was the one who was actually bringing them in, but other times other people would bring them in. And so I got to meet all these great musicians a lot. That so it was, it's like I said, when I was thinking about moving to New York and I went there, there were already you know, people were, like I said, it was, you know, people were already knew I was coming, so.
Oh, no pressure.
No pressure, yeah.
Yeah.
So I you know, and you know, I just, you know, I went there and I was there for almost a month, you know, just going around, checking things out.
Right.
And I just said, I can't move here. I can't.
Yeah.
I like visiting here, and you know, it's fun.
Yeah.
But living here, I mean, you know, even though people were really nice and.
Yeah. How did you end up here in Denver after, you know, were you already here in Denver by then? Or?
No. How I moved here, there was a lady named Patty Carr. She moved to Arkansas from Denver. And she couldn't find work that paid her as well as she worked. She was from New York. And she had moved to Denver, and she moved to Arkansas. I don't know why, but she did, because she's not in New York and Arkansas. But she couldn't find work that paid her as well, so she moved back to Denver, and she started sending me to Westford with all the clubs and everything. And so instead of moving to New York, I moved out here.
Figure you could lay some roots here, huh?
Yeah, that was Patty. I don't know if you remember Patty Karsh. She was like an older woman, and she was like.
Yeah, I don't remember the name.
Yeah, but.
Wow, man, Denver's a much better place because of that move. So you know, we're gonna take a little funny turn here. Do you have any like really funny stories or memorable? Crazy memories of a gig or being on the road, or any kind of goofy things that have happened that, you know, we all have these human stories.
Well, here's one. This guy, we was at the Peck.
No names. We don't have to worry about names.
El Chapultepec.
Yeah.
And this guy just came up and walked on stage with his horn. He didn't ask to sit in, and it was like, I was on stage and I said, everybody's gonna just stop, and we just all stopped and just looked at him like in the middle of the tune. It's like, what are you doing, man?
He thought he was ready. Yeah.
No, it wasn't a matter of ready. He wasn't asked to come up here.
Right. Yeah.
And he wasn't ready either. That's and we just stopped, and he kind of played for a few measures, and then he just walked off. I didn't say anything to him. I just like,
that would have been enough for me. Yeah.
It's like, you know, and I try to tell him, you don't do that. You know, you get invited up to the stage. You don't just walk on stage.
Right.
I mean, if everybody already knew you and you say, oh yeah, come on in, but you don't just walk up on the stage and start playing.
Yeah. One of the perils of being a jazz musician, and some of the crazy stuff that comes with it. Here's another question. Has there been any, you know, we like to talk about gear also. We're in a bass shop here, and we wanted to transition to talking about gear. Have there been any memorable basses that you've played or that you own that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I mean, all my basses that I played, I really enjoyed having. I mean, I sold my. I once had 3 basses, and I sold one, but I still have my original bass that I still have, and it still sounds great.
Do you know what it is? Is it the Morelli? Or is it German bass or?
Yes, a German bass. Yeah, but I don't even know because it's not.
Some old German, just some old German bass.
It's not, you know, and I had some work done on it, and it still sounds great, you know, and I still play it, you know.
Yeah. How long have you had it?
Oh, ever since I started playing.
Nice, man. You're like one of the few lucky ones that could say, you know, you have some of those your original old, you know, first instruments like that.
I mean, I had at one time I had 3 basses, and and it was just, and it was like I said, I can't, and I wasn't playing. I mean, I play this bass and I play the other one. I would kind of rotate them out
Right.
every couple of years and things. The other one's down in the basement. Just kind of it's cool down there and doesn't get hot or anything.
It's important sometimes if you have a couple basses to rotate them, and sometimes if you got a really sweet bass that you gotta not put as many miles on sometimes, or at least.
Well, it's not a matter of that. It's just that you rotate them out, just to make sure I play them.
Yeah.
Because if you don't play them, it kind of gets all the seams and everything.
Yeah, they get stiff too. That's a thing as a restoration guy, bass guy. For sure they get stiff.
Yeah.
And cool. Wow. And you're currently playing it's a Bussetto model. I noticed here. I'm looking over at it. It's like an Eastman or do you know what it is?
I'm not exactly sure what it is.
Well, it's obviously good enough because Ken's playing it. So.
I mean, my whole thing was that when I played it, it had the sound to it. That even though it had been sitting in this place for a few years, it had the sound. So that's for me.
One of the most memorable things one of the things I always think about when I would play with you and would always got my attention is, we'd be playing a ballad or something real, laid back, and man, you had this growl that, you can pull out of your basses, and from the technical standpoint, it's this kind of mind-bending job to get basses to do that from the technician standpoint, but man, I always remember that about your sound. It's just like you had this beautiful growl and through ballads and this warm, fat sound. And
well, I mean, that's from the people. Like I say, the people that I listen to. Leroy Vinegar. Like I say, he was like, and like I say, he was like known for his time and sound, but he wasn't necessarily a great. So I mean, he took solos and he actually made a CD. And where he was, he took more solos than normally. Because when I listened to him on albums, a lot of, he would still take solos, but that wasn't his main thing. But, and so that gave me, like I said, gave me a really good foundation for.
Yeah. And what other basses just gave you, just have this tone quality that you're always looking for?
Well, I mean, when I heard Rufus Reed. I really liked his sound.
Yeah.
Ron Carter had a great sound. Ray Brown, Paul Chambers, all those guys. And so, I'm probably just a mishmash of all those people that I listened to.
Some of what we learned,
Yeah.
What kind of strings do you play? Do you prefer? Does it depend on the bass?
Corellis I've been using those for several years now.
Corellis?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. What advice do you wish that you had early in your career with regards to becoming a jazz bass player?
Well, my first, Charles Thomas, I think I told you that story when I was going through my Scott LaFaro phase. I think I mentioned this before. And so we were on this gig and Charles was playing and I was going, I'd been listening to Bill Evans with Scott LaFaro.
Right.
And so I started doing kind of the, conversational thing that he does. And Charles turned around and said, play the
play the line. Yeah, right. Dude, that's so funny because when I played with you or I've listened to you on a gig, that was like the thing that I'm like waiting to hear from Kenny. He's like this, this cool. You have these cool lines, man, that you drop down the fingerboard, and I was like, that's the thing, It's like, I felt like that was for me, man, because you do it so well. But yeah, man, as bassist, the responsibility to hold it down, right? It's priority.
Yeah, that's priority, and that was a lesson that I needed at that time. I mean, I mean, you know, that's in learning when to do those, you know, like
Right.
things like
Right.
embellishments and things like that. Not every
Right.
not all the time.
Yeah, well, but you know, unless you're booking your own gig, then you do
yeah,
what you want, right?
yeah. So that was the, you know, a good lesson. You know, and I could say I mean, I played with Charles, and he was like a great player there from Memphis, and he taught me a lot of stuff, even though it wasn't necessarily like you would get in school. It was just in real life playing,
Right, real time, right?
real time playing.
Yeah, yeah. Which that experience is something you can't buy in school most of the time. Any player, dead or alive, that you would like to interview?
Well, like I said, I've gotten to play with all these people that I used to listen to, man. So,
You were there already.
Yeah, and so I can't complain. You know, Rufus Reed, you know, Ron Carter. I didn't get to meet Paul Chambers or anything, but
Yeah.
Eddie Gomez.
Oh yeah.
all these guys, you know, and so I feel blessed that I even got to at some point. I mean, they know who I am, and a lot of them, like Ron Carter, was the one who recommended me to Benny Golson.
Yeah.
You know, because I took
a heck
a
of an
lesson.
endorsement.
Because I took a lesson with Ron Carter. He's Benny Golson. Going well, that was initially, to Denver, and he said, Ken Walker.
Yeah. Who? The last question, and it's certainly not the most important, but who are some of the young bass players that, if you'd like to name, have caught your attention? That, you know.
Well, I mean, a lot of them are my former students. You know,
Yeah.
Patrick McDevitt. You know,
Yeah.
God, I'm spacing all their names.
I put you on the spot, right?
I mean, you know, when I was teaching at DU, all these guys,
Yeah.
you know, taking lessons and things, and so hopefully, you know, I have, you know, make the bass players, you know, in Denver, added to
Yeah.
it. Even, I mean, except, you know, maybe they moved somewhere, but a lot of them are still around, and they still call me for sub, you know, when they get better gigs. But
Well, I hope you understand the legacy you've left, because man, you left the bass world with so many great students that you've taught, and the music that you've made, and
you know, Patrick McDevitt and all those guys. You know,
yeah.
you know, and I was, you know, I enjoyed teaching them. You know, that's, you know, that was my thing. If they came in and they were serious about learning, you know, trying to help them get to where they wanted to get to.
Yeah. Now, you taught at Lamont School of Music.
Yeah.
How long did you teach there?
I was there 29 years.
29 years at DU. Yeah, it's a long time.
I was going to retire at 30, and the pandemic hit, and it's kind of screwed that up.
Right.
Because and a lot of other things that started happening at that time, you know. That's kind of like, when was it? When I found out my kidneys were screwed up.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
I was gonna, so I had to kind of, you know, that 29 years, but that kind of happened a few months after that. We kind of like changed my.
Man, we have to adjust. We just have to figure out a way to adjust for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, I can still play, even though I'm doing Dallas, it's 3 times a week, but you know, I'm dealing with it, and I feel better because of the Dallas. So Dallas is, but you know, it's still a drag. Some days it catches up with me, and I just get a little depressed. Not little, a lot depressed, but as long as I can play, that kind of keeps my, you know.
That's a great gift of music. You know, I talk about this a lot with my kids. You know, my kids do sports and other things, and they're also playing music. And I told students that too. I said, you know, the body might fall apart, but we can still, you know, we can still pick up our instruments and play and enjoy.
I mean, I always feel better after I play. And you know, maybe I said this before. You know, the Greeks used to think of music as a healing healing art.
Yeah.
I mean, and they would actually use it in their, because they were like some of the first to like think about medicine and things
Right.
like that. So, but they thought it was something that helps heal the body.
Yeah.
So,
And now there's a lot of modern science that proves that too,
Yeah.
and it's just a pleasure to be part of the ride. And there's our first interview, guys, with Ken Walker, and I'm so happy that he could be here and wanted to do this, Ken. And it's so important to remember our there's a word that the African American community is embraced called the griot, and they're the people, the librarians that remember the history and the culture and the people who paved the way. And Ken, for jazz and jazz bass playing in the bass world, is one of those important figures that we need to remember and enjoy. And and man, you've done so much for us. So I want to make sure that you hear it from me. And what's the next phase for Ken? What's you got anything coming up soon that you want to tell people about?
I'm still playing at Dazzle with the Sextet every last Friday.
Yeah.
So that's still the main gig I have. I mean, and I still play with Ron the Go and Bar 404.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And stuff like that, but it's not like when I was playing all the time, I have at least 20, 24 gigs a month.
Yeah.
It's not like that anymore, so.
Well,
That's okay though, with what I have to deal with the kidney stuff.
Right.
It's fine, if I have, 5 or 6 gigs a month, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
So, kind of like edging into thinking occasionally about retiring, but I still enjoy playing.
Yeah. Well, thanks, buddy.
you.
It's
Yeah.
been a blessing talking to you, and man, get out and see Kenny anytime you can, and you should. This is like 5 of the 10 commandments of jazz bass right here for Denver's community. And I want to thank Kenny again for this inaugural discussion and interview here at Mi Vida Strings. I'm Eric Trujillo, and hopefully we do this again. Bye, everybody.
Bye.